What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the episode of Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey McLaury. So today is the first Sunday of the NFL season. I wanted to give my predictions before the Thursday night game and the Friday night game, but unfortunately didn't get the time to do so. So in this episode, it's going to be a breakdown of win-loss records for each team. Then I'll give some playoff predictions, and I will also give my NFL award predictions as well. Going to be right with some of these things, going to be wrong with some of these things, but it's all fun at the end of the day. Definitely going to be some hot takes in here, some that might go right, some that might go wrong. But obviously with it being week one, no one really knows how the season will play out. We'll start out with the AFC East. I have it being the Bills in first, Patriots second, Dolphins third, Jets in fourth. I have the Bills going 12-5, the Patriots going 9-8, the Dolphins going 7-10, and the Jets going 3-14. The Bills are my only playoff team in this division. The Bills are easily the best team in this division. I was down on them last year, but they had a big year and obviously have some health heading into this season as well. Matt Milano's back healthy. Tyron Johnson will be healthy. Josh Allen obviously had a great year last year. And now Keon Coleman's expected to maybe take a step up. So we'll see how this team looks this year. They obviously got James Cook under contract as well on a long-term deal. I think this team's the best team in the division. Besides that, I think the Patriots will be competitive. I think they'll be 9-8. They have an easy schedule. They had a good offseason, adding some good veteran impact players, including Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry. The offensive line and wide receiver, that's still an issue for them, those two groups. I think Drake May could definitely use more help at both of those positions on the offensive line and at wide receiver. I think a lot of Patriots fans are very, very high on Drake May, and rightfully so, has a lot of talent and showed some promise last year, but I wasn't fully convinced he was necessarily the answer for them and necessarily the lock to be their franchise quarterback for the future. There was definitely a lot of promise around his game last year, but there's still a lot of room to grow as well. I think the Patriots needed to do more around him, which Stephon Diggs was a good addition, but he is obviously older now, and the offensive line necessarily isn't better than it was last year. It might be a little better, but it's not much, much better. I think they could have obviously used some more help around May to make things easier on him, but now with a better head coach at the helm, with Mike Vrabel being, as the leader in that locker room, things will be a little bit tighter with this team. I expect them to be competitive and be 9-8. The Dolphins are a team I've always been high on, but I think this year they struggle again. I like Tua Tagovailoa. I like Mike McDaniel, but I see them under 500 again this year. I think they'll trade Tyreek Hill at some point mid-season. McDaniel's a good coach, and I know a lot of people think he could potentially be fired midway through the season if things go poorly. If the Dolphins ever do get rid of him, which I do think they struggle this season, I think he'd be picked up very quickly. I think he's a good coach. The Jets are already battling injuries with Elijah Vera-Tucker being done for the season with a torn tricep. He's just not been able to catch a break the last couple of years, unfortunately. I like Justin Fields. I was very high on him a couple of years ago, and he played decent as, a quarterback with Pittsburgh last year, splitting time with Russell Wilson. But this will not be an easy task for Justin Fields to carry this team. He's back with his college teammate and Garrett Wilson, which will be cool to see. But I think Aaron Glenn will have his hands full trying to get this team on the rise and back on track. I think it's going to be a rebuilding year for them. I think they'll be in play for the first overall pick. Then in the AFC North, I have the Ravens in first, the Bengals in second, Steelers in third, Browns in fourth. I have the Ravens going 11-6. Bengals going 10-7. They will be a playoff team as a wild card. I have the Steelers going 8-9 and the Browns going 5-12. This division's a tough one. I think the Ravens have the best roster, so I gave them the benefit of the doubt over Cincinnati. The Baltimore Ravens run game will still be elite with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and obviously adding DeAndre Hopkins as the third or fourth receiver is going to help that offense as well. I still think they need to get Lamar Jackson a legit wide receiver one at some point. Their defense is star-studded. Kyle Hamilton's great. Roquan Smith's great. Jair Alexander, now being healthy and being somebody in their secondary that they can point to make some plays, is a great addition as well. I think they'll be the best team in this division. The Bengals' defense has been their issue and their offensive line as well at times. They found a way to get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins back on contract on long-term deals with Joe Burrow, and even resolved the issue with Trey Hendrickson for a year. But they need to start on a better note this season. They've been really struggling in week 1 and week 2 the last few seasons. They need to start this year on a better note. That's why they missed the playoffs last year. As for Pittsburgh, I've always been high on Aaron Rodgers. I've always been a fan of his, and I wish him the best. But I'm not sure if Pittsburgh makes the playoffs this year. I still think they'll be competitive, but this division is tough. I do expect Rodgers to put up some good numbers, though, with DK Metcalf. The Browns are still rebuilding. They have some nice pieces that they try to add around, like Denzel Ward. I like Jerry Jeudy as well. Joe Flacco could keep things competitive a little, but this team I do think will still struggle. They do still have some veterans on the offensive line, though, that are all under contract just for one more season. So next year, the Browns could look even more different heading into week 1 of the 2026 season. Next up in the AFC South are the Jaguars in first, Texans in second, Colts in third, and the Titans in fourth. The Jaguars going 10-7. The Texans going 9-8, making the playoffs as a wild card. The Colts going 7-10, and the Titans going 6-11. We'll start off with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I expect big things for this team. If you look at what Baker Mayfield did last year in Tampa Bay with Liam Cohn as his offense coordinator, and now you look at Trevor Lawrence with Liam Cohn as his head coach, I expect a big-time year for Trevor Lawrence. I liked the addition of Travis Hunter. I think he fits well next to Brian Thomas Jr. They added to their offensive line as well, which was a need. I'm giving Trevor Lawrence one more year where I'm going to give my full confidence in him. I know he wasn't as high in my rankings this year as he has been in years past, but I still think he can have a very good year. Brian Thomas Jr. is a legit wide receiver 1. Travis Hunter, I think, is going to be used more as a wide receiver now than a cornerback. I think around the draft, I thought he'd be better as a corner than a wide receiver in the NFL. But looking at this team, I think he fits better as a wide receiver next to Brian Thomas Jr. I think they have the chance, considering how poor this division is, they have the chance to rise up the ranks quickly. I expect big things from this team this year, and I might be completely wrong, and they might be very poor again and struggle, but I think this team can be competitive. I do think Tank Bigsby is a good backup running back to Travis Etienne to start the season. I think Bigsby ends up being the starter there at some point, and I do obviously, as I said, still have full faith in Trevor Lawrence to figure things out. But time is definitely ticking on him. He needs to have a really good year. Otherwise, there are going to be question marks about him and obviously his contract and what Jacksonville is going to do in the future. Trev needs to have a really good year to obviously keep himself, rising up the ranks and also give the Jaguars a chance to make the playoffs. They need a lot out of him this season. He did play through a lot of injuries last year, so you got to give him credit for that. The Texans are still a good team, and I expect them in the playoff mix, which is why I have them being my 7th team in the playoffs, so just barely getting in. They added a big tackle in Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota to help replace Laramie Tunsil. C.J. Stroud did have a down year last year a little bit, but they did give him some more weapons this offseason. Even with Stephon Diggs leaving, they did add some pieces, including Christian Kirk, and also getting Jaden Higgins in the draft, a wide receiver out of Iowa State. I expect them to be very solid defensively as well. They have some good pieces there. Derek Stingley Jr. is really good. Will Anderson is a very good linebacker as well. A lot of people have him being a potential defensive player of the year candidate. Had double-digit sacks last year, if I remember correctly. So he's a good piece to build around on the defense. We'll see how things work out. I do think Christian Kirk can return to form next to C.J. Stroud. Hopefully he's healthy. I think he can still be a good contributing player on an offense. I'm very excited to see Daniel Jones back as a starting quarterback after beating out Anthony Richardson in the offseason. I think Tyler Warren is going to be a top 5 tight end at some point. I expect Daniel Jones to have a good connection with him to begin the year. Jonathan Taylor is going to help open up the pass game for Daniel Jones. Taylor's a top 3 running back in the game, in my opinion. I think he's still very talented, and I expect a big year from him. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but I expect some competitiveness. I know Daniel Jones has struggled over the last couple of years, especially with injuries, and then even last year had his opportunities in the Giants before getting benched. I think Daniel Jones has had his moments, and he's shown promise. He obviously has to put a lot of things together, but I still have full faith in him to be a starting quarterback and be competitive and help you win ball games. I have not given up on him like most, and that's even with knowing and acknowledging he has struggled over the last couple of years. I still think Daniel Jones can be a good starting quarterback. I like Cam Ward. I think he's going to put up some decent numbers for Tennessee with Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, and Alec Ayomana. Ayomana is a guy I liked in college. I expect him to be a contributing factor right away for them. I don't see them competing for the playoffs, but they do have some talented pieces on the defensive side as well. Jeffrey Simmons is a good veteran defensive lineman. L'Jarius Sneed, a good cornerback who got paid heavily by them. He needs to have a bounce-back year. We'll see how things work out for the Titans. I think they'll win some games, be a little competitive, but I still think they'll be in the mix for a top pick in next year's draft. And then in the AFC West, this division's tough as well. The Chargers had a very strong offseason getting Keenan Allen back, who looked really good in Week 1. Mekhi Becton, Tyler Conklin, Omarion Hampton. Even before the Chargers beat the Chiefs on Friday night, I had a feeling the Chiefs would not be as dominant this year as they've been in years past. And that obviously would open up the pathway for the Chargers to maybe compete for the top spot in the division. I thought the Chargers heading into that game on Friday night had the best roster in the division. Whether or not that would play out and they would win the division, who knows? The Chiefs always find a way to be competitive and win games and always find a way to be a top team in the AFC. So it's a tough prediction to expect the Chargers to win this division and the Chiefs going 9-8. But I do think the Chargers have the best roster in this division. I think they're going to be very competitive. Herbert played very well in week 1, throwing for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. And like I said, I thought they would be right in the mix of the top team in this division heading into week 1. And right around that first game, right around Friday night at kickoff, I had a feeling this Chargers team would surprise some people this year, and obviously they surprised the Chiefs in week 1 getting the win. So in order in this division in the AFC West, I have the Chargers at 10-7 winning the division. I have the Chiefs at 9-8 being a wild card team, barely sneaking in. I have the Broncos at 9-8 missing the playoffs, and the Raiders going 7-10. The Chiefs are getting older. Kelsey's a year older now. Juju Smith-Schuster's a year older now. Mahomes hasn't been as dominant the last couple of years as he's been, and that's even with making the Super Bowl last year and winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I still think they'll sneak into the playoffs, but I would not be surprised if this team misses the playoffs at the same time. Maybe I'll be wrong. Who knows? They still have a lot of talent on this team, but I do think there are some question marks that really makes this team a more beatable team now than they've been in the past. As for the Broncos, Bo Nix and the Broncos really surprised me last year. I don't think Bo Nix has as great of a year 2, and I expect him to take a step back, which is why I have them missing the playoffs. And then as for the Raiders, they did add Geno Smith, who has been consistent as a starter over the last few years in Seattle. But wide receiver is going to be an issue for this team, especially if Jacoby Myers gets traded at some point. Myers is one of the most underrated players in the game. He should be making more money than they've given him, I think. And then as for Ashton Jeanty, I'm not as high on Jeanty as most. I may be wrong, but I don't expect star numbers from him in year 1. We'll see what happens. I know a lot of people are very high on him, but I think when I watched him in college, I thought he was a good running back, but I didn't necessarily think he should have went as high in the draft. That's just me. Could be completely wrong. Just want to always give my honest opinion, and obviously I'll always acknowledge if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong on a guy, I always say that here on the podcast. So we'll see if I'm wrong about Jeanty, but I don't expect year 1 big numbers from him. With that being said, considering their wide receiver core, Jeanty's going to get a lot of chances to try to carry the offense on the ground. Brock Bowers is a very good tight end, and obviously he's probably going to be their main target, but I still think wide receiver is a need for them at some point in the future. They're going to have to address that. And then Pete Carroll's a good coach. He's going to keep them competitive. I think they'll be in the mix being, towards the end of the season in December, still have a chance, maybe be in the hunt in the playoffs, but I have them falling to 7-10 overall. Now switching over to the NFC, we'll start out with the NFC East. I have the Eagles in first, winning 12 games, going 12-5. The Commanders in second, being a wild card team, going 10-7. The Giants at 8-9, and the Cowboys at 7-10. The Eagles still have the best roster in this division. Even with a shaky start to the year in week 1, they still got the win against Dallas. As I mentioned in my quarterback episode, I'm not as high on Jalen Hurts as most people are, but I do still have to give him credit for winning the Super Bowl last year. There is a lot of talent around him, but you can't necessarily fault him for that. Their defense is loaded. They have a great offensive line, have great weapons. They should still be the number 1 team in this division. As for the Commanders, I think they take a slight step back rather than a slight step up this year. I think Daniels will play similar to C.J. Stroud and how he did in year 2 after both guys surprised in year 1 and took their team to the playoffs as a rookie. I think Stroud's year 2 will be similar to what Daniels does this year in his year 2. The Commanders will still be a playoff team, I think, just like Houston was last year in Stroud's second year. But I think they're a beatable team, as evident by some of their close wins last year. They did find a way to win some of those games, even beating the Giants in a close one. But I think this team is beatable. I would not be surprised if they fall out and go 9-8 and miss the playoffs. But I still think when you look at this team, there's a lot of talent. They did add some pieces in the offseason, including getting Terry McLaurin on a new contract, getting Deebo Samuel, who a lot of people are down on. We'll see if he has a bounce-back year, but he didn't really look great last year, so I wouldn't necessarily bank on him bouncing back this year and having a big year. And they did add Larry Tunsil. That was a good trade for them in the offseason, shoring up that offensive line. So we'll see how they do. I still think they can win 10 games and make the playoffs, but I would not be surprised, as I said, if they go 9-8 and be one of the first teams out of the playoffs. As for the Giants, they added to their already strong pass rush this offseason, getting Abdul Carter in the draft and stacking him next to Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau. This pass rush is very similar to that Giants pass rush that won the Super Bowl in 2008 and also the Super Bowl in 2012. They're really trying to fortify that pass rush and make sure that every single week, any opposing offensive line and quarterback has to prepare for those guys. And it's going to be really tough to double a guy like Dexter Lawrence, considering the Giants have Burns, Thibodeau, and Carter. That defense is going to be strong. They did add Javon Holland as well in the secondary. Did add Paulson Adebo as well. I think this Giants team is going to be competitive. Russell Wilson was competitive last year as Pittsburgh started quarterback, but I do expect Jackson Dart to start at some point by week 8. Dart's a very promising player who I think could be a top 15 to 18 quarterback after a full year starting. That's just how I feel. I think he could be, right in the middle of the pack of quarterbacks in the NFL if he were to get a chance to start. Offensive line will still be an issue for this team. They'll be competitive. I think they can win around 8 or 9 games, so potentially be in the playoff mix, but I see them just missing the playoffs. I think Andrew Thomas still being banged up is an issue for this team. Evan Neal didn't necessarily progress going into the interior on the offensive line. He is going to be a healthy scratch, I just read, heading into today. So that's obviously not a great start to the year for Neal, considering the Giants really were hoping he had a bounce-back year by moving him to the interior. We'll see what the rest of the year holds. But I know he did struggle a little bit in the preseason, but obviously going from tackle your whole career in the NFL to guard is not the easiest transition. With it being said, he did play some guard at Alabama in his first couple of years, if I remember correctly. So it's not like he's never played guard before. We'll see how things work out for the rest of the season. Andrew Thomas, the Giants have really struggled when he's been hurt over the last few seasons. So if he's out week 1, which it seems like he's doubtful to play, is what I read, it's not going to be easy trying to replace him. I think this team could be competitive, win 8 or 9 games, and be potentially in the playoff mix like I mentioned. But I do think they probably miss the playoffs by a game or 2. The Cowboys trading away Micah Parsons is a difficult move. But to get 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark in return for obviously a star pass rusher, Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive players in the game. But Parsons did want out, and the Cowboys were not going to give him the money he wanted. So considering that, and Parsons had some leverage since he was going to hold out and not play, the Cowboys went and traded him. And I don't think it was the worst return. Could they have maybe gotten more? Potentially. I do think 2 ones, though, and a good defensive tackle is a solid return. When you look at the Cowboys and the fact that they didn't want to pay Micah Parsons, that definitely took away some leverage from them because Parsons was going to hold out, and they wanted to obviously trade him before the season began and got more back in return than they maybe could have if they waited. I do think it's tough to trade him, though. He's a game-changing talent, and it's not going to be easy to replace him. I was surprised with how well Dallas played at Week 1 versus Philadelphia, but I still see this team as the 4th best in the division. Now moving on to the NFC North, I have the Packers at 13-4 winning the division. The Bears being a surprise playoff team going 10-7. The Lions going 9-8 and missing the playoffs. And the Vikings going 8-9. Even before the Packers added Micah Parsons, I thought they had the best chance to win the division. This is a team that I was very high on heading into last season. I had them, if I remember correctly, in the Super Bowl last year in my predictions before the season began. And heading into this year, my prediction is going to be the same. I think this team could be a Super Bowl team. And like I mentioned, before they even added Parsons, I thought they had the best chance to win the division. Adding Parsons to an already talented defense with Xavier McKinney and Rashawn Gary makes this team even better. People are sleeping on Jordan Love as well. People are forgetting that 2 years ago, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when healthy. Then last year, battled injuries and really never found his footing. I expect a big bounce back year from Jordan Love. Moving on to the Bears, Ryan Poles had a big offseason, emphasizing the offensive line, which was a big need for Caleb Williams in that offense. Trading for Joe Thuney, trading for Jonah Jackson proves how much that Ryan Poles valued fixing the interior offensive line this season. They drafted very well, too, getting Colston Loveland, a tight end out of Michigan who could be a contributor right away. Ozzie Trapillo can be a potential contributor on the offensive line right away and compete. And then you look at Luther Burden. He's going to be a contributor on offense day 1. Was a high second-round pick for them. I expect a huge year out of Caleb Williams in his sophomore season. He was very underrated last season, to be honest. And you look at Ben Johnson now being his head coach, who obviously helped Jared Goff at a big-time year last year. That's going to open up this offensive playbook and really open up the potential for Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams has a big-time year this season. I think a lot of people are down on Caleb, especially after last year. And I think it's going to be similar to Bryce Young. A year 1 where not everything went their way. They had a lot of pressure on them, especially being the first overall pick, especially with a second overall pick being a star quarterback right away, leading their team to the playoffs with C.J. Stroud for the Texans a couple years ago, and then last year Jaden Daniels with the Commanders. That put a lot of pressure on Bryce Young as a rookie when he was getting compared to C.J. Stroud the whole time, and then last year Jaden Daniels is always getting compared to Caleb Williams. That doesn't make it easier on those guys like Williams and like Young, but I think Williams has a big-time year this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, but he has a lot of potential, has a really strong arm, and this is a guy I wasn't that high on in college. I thought he was a little bit overrated, and obviously there were some issues with him, and people thought he was maybe too overconfident in himself, but I think Caleb Williams could play. I think with a lot of people putting a lot of pressure on him, and there were a lot of critics, and everybody that it felt like was against him over the last year, he grew a fan in me. When I watched him play, I thought, this kid has the potential, just obviously needs some more help around him, and I'm buying in on Caleb Williams. I think he has a big-time year this season. As for the Lions, missing the playoffs may be a surprise, but this division is really tough. So when I was making these predictions, I knew probably 2 of these teams was going to miss the playoffs. I think the Lions' window to win the Super Bowl was at its highest last year. Losing Aaron Glenn, losing Ben Johnson, that's both a worry, for that team trying to replace those two guys. I could be completely wrong, but I have them as the first team out of the playoffs in the NFC. Like I mentioned, I think last year was their best potential chance to win the Super Bowl. As for the Vikings, they have a strong receiving core led by Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Those are two incredible weapons for a year one quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. You add in Kevin O'Connell. He's a fantastic coach. So McCarthy does have a good supporting cast around him heading into his first year as a starter, now being healthy. I was not high on J.J. McCarthy as a prospect in Michigan, so I don't think he's going to necessarily step in and light it up right away and carry this team to the playoffs, which is why I have them as fourth in this division. But we'll see how things work out. I was not high on the Vikings last year, and obviously they surprised me. Now for the NFC West, I have the Rams winning this division going 10-7, the Cardinals going 9-8 and just missing the playoffs. The 49ers going 7-10, and the Seahawks going 6-11. The Rams did add Devontae Adams this offseason to help replace Cooper Kupp. Adams is still a very productive receiver and showed some promise and still showcased that he can still be a top receiver in this game, considering the numbers he put up last year with Aaron Rodgers in New York. Sean McVay is an excellent head coach, always finds a way to keep things competitive. So I think this team will still win the division. The Rams did give the Eagles their toughest playoff game last year. This team will still be good as long as Matt Stafford is fully healthy. They'll still be a playoff team. The Cardinals, I was back and forth on being a playoff team. For some reason, I just had a feeling when I was making these predictions on Saturday, I thought maybe this Cardinals team will make the playoffs and maybe even win a playoff game this year. But after I did all my predictions and looked at all the records, I had them missing the playoffs, just being right outside of it, going 9-8. They were a game under 500 last year. They added some good pieces in the offseason, including in the draft, getting Walter Nolan III, helping that defensive line. Adding Will Johnson in the second round was an absolute steal, maybe the biggest steal of the draft. And then Josh Sweat was a free agent move for them to help their pass rush. I like Jonathan Gannon. I think he's a very good head coach. I think he's underrated. Kyler Murray's a guy that I necessarily haven't been the highest on over the last couple of years, and I didn't have him that high on my quarterback rankings. But after making these predictions, if the Cardinals were to go 9-8, or let's say even 10-7 and somehow sneak into the playoffs, Kyler Murray would probably have to be higher on my quarterback rankings list. It's tough making the ranking predictions before you do the win-loss records because, like Mike Hurley noted, he was really prioritizing where quarterbacks would be win-loss record-wise and success-wise in relation to other quarterbacks when you look at, standing of, what their offensive line looks like and weapons look like. Mike was really emphasizing win-loss record and how they perform. I was looking a lot at the time based on quarterback situation, so what their offensive line looked like and what their wide receivers look like, but also I did emphasize a lot of stats in there, how many touchdowns they throw, how many passing yards they throw for, what their touchdown to turnover ratio would be. I was really looking at that a lot of the time when I was making these predictions. If Kyler Murray does have this team make the playoffs, though, he'd have to be higher on my list. We'll see how things work out. As for the 49ers, this is a team that's aging. George Kittle's now a year older. Trent Williams is now a year older. Adding the Christian McCaffrey is already banged up heading into week one. Brandon Ayuk is still out. They obviously traded Deebo Samuel. Ricky Pearsall did show a lot of promise last year in the last few weeks. He could be a guy that could surprise a lot of people this year and be a potential star as a receiver for them. I think they're in a tough position to try to still contend, though, with this team. I know Brock Purdy is a guy Mike Hurley's very high on. I've never been the highest on Purdy, but he obviously does have some talent around him still. McCaffrey, Kittle, Pearsall, when Ayuk gets back. But like I said, this team is aging a little bit. I think they end up being third in this division. The Seahawks did add Sam Darnold, and he obviously did have a great year last year, but he doesn't have the same supporting cast as he did in Minnesota. I like Darnold, but I don't know if he necessarily repeats the same success he had last year and leads this team to the playoffs. As for the NFC South, I have the Bucs winning the division going 11-6. The Panthers going 9-8 and being a playoff team, the seventh one in. The Falcons going 8-9 and the Saints going 3-14. The Bucs are an interesting team. I could see them winning the division, but also could see them finishing in third in this division. Baker Mayfield balled out last year. I think he plays well again, but 41 passing touchdowns is going to be a tough task for him to try to get to this year again. When Chris Godwin returns and gets back from injury and he plays next to Emeka Egbuka and plays next to Mike Evans, this probably could be the best wide receiver core in the NFL. The Panthers, they went 4-5 in their last 9 games last year with some close losses to Kansas City, Philadelphia, and Tampa Bay. Obviously 3 playoff teams last year. Bryce Young looked awesome in his last 10 games last season, and I'm very thankful I stuck with him through the ups and downs after being benched. I know a lot of people went very down on him or were criticizing him, but I stuck with him through it all. I knew it really wasn't necessarily his fault considering the situation wasn't great. He had Frank Reich at one point, which Frank Reich didn't really open up the playbook to give him confidence in his game. And then you obviously look at the offensive line was poor the last couple of years. But they emphasized that this offseason. They added to that offensive line a little bit the last year or so, and obviously added Ted Heroic McMillan in the draft. I expect a big jump in the quarterback rankings for Bryce Young. In his last 3 games last year, played very well, 10 touchdowns, no picks, 612 passing yards in those 3 games. I expect some big numbers from Bryce Young this year. I think Caleb Williams and him can both have big-time years. I expect 30-plus passing touchdowns from each of them. And that may be a tough get for both of those guys, but I expect big numbers from those guys heading into this year. The Falcons are an interesting team. They have a lot of talent and were competitive last year with Kirk Cousins until he got hurt with his shoulder and his elbow. And then they brought in Michael Penix Jr., and I like Michael Penix Jr. a lot. I have a lot of faith in him to be a good quarterback in the NFL, and I just want to see them unleash him and let him really air it out and throw the ball, not have him play as conservative. Let him throw the ball downfield and play to his strengths, which is obviously the deep ball, and his strength is how good of an arm talent he has. I still like Kirk Cousins as well. I think he could still be a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, and I think he'll be a good trade candidate for this team midway through the season. You look at Nick Nash, he's on the practice squad for this team. He's a guy that I mentioned a lot on the podcast over the last couple of years. I think he can be a contributing wide receiver right away. I'm a little bit disappointed that he's on the practice squad to begin the year, but I do think he can work his way up and be a competitive receiver in the league. Like I mentioned, Michael Penix Jr. has a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent on this team as well. Bijan Robinson's great. The offensive line's really good. Chris Lindstrom's probably the best guard in the NFL. Drake London put up some big numbers last year. Kyle Pitts has never really played to the level that a lot of people expected him to coming out of college, but he's still got good talent. And obviously, like I just noted, that offensive line's great. I think Michael Penix Jr. is set up to succeed in this offense, but I do have this team going 8-9. I do think the Falcons and the Panthers, I think they'll both be competitive and be similar, but I think they'll be separated by a game, and I'm probably a little bit biased giving the Panthers the edge here to make the playoffs because I just want to see Bryce Young succeed and see him really build off of a great end to last season. We'll see how things work out. I do know it's obviously a tough ask for the Panthers to make the playoffs considering their roster is young in a lot of ways, and obviously there's still a lot of room to grow for this team. But every year there's a team that's surprised that nobody expects to make the playoffs. And I could be completely wrong with this. And Carolina could only win 5 games, and no one would really be surprised. But they also could win 9 games, I think, and potentially be in the playoff mix. So I have them making the playoffs here. I know that's a big surprise and a big hot take, but we'll see how things work out. And then as for the Saints, I think they have the toughest roster in the NFL. I think they have the best chance to land the number 1 overall pick. I'm not very high on Spencer Rattler. And this roster is aging with Cam Jordan being older now, Demario Davis being older now. Brandon Cooks did return to their lineup, but he's now a year older. And I know they're still waiting on Chris Olave to get back healthy. Olave is a guy that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. When he gets back healthy, he can still be a very good wide receiver in this league. I think because of last year and the injuries, a lot of people kind of have him under the radar now. No one's really talking about him, but I still think he can be a very good player. And the same thing with Alvin Kamara. He's a top running back in the game still and doesn't get the praise he deserves. So there is some talent around Spencer Rattler, but I do think this team struggles. I think they end up landing the 1st overall pick. I think they'll be in that same conversation with the New York Jets, looking at the number 1 overall pick. Like I already mentioned, though, I could be way wrong about a lot of these win-loss predictions. No one ever knows how things are going to shake out. And I know some people agree, some people won't. And that's the beauty of sports, right? You know, having a debate and being able to talk things out and, predict things. And a lot of times some predictions will be right, some will be wrong. But that's the beauty of it, is that everyone will have a different opinion. And that's why sports are great, right? Because a lot of people have different perspectives on players. And that can obviously open up a great conversation. So we'll see how things work out with these predictions. And now for my playoff predictions. So in the wild card round, these are the seeds 1 through 7 in the AFC. The Bills are the 1 seed, Ravens are the 2 seed, Chargers are the 3 seed, Ravens are the 4 seed. And then I have the Bengals as the 5 seed, Chiefs as the 6 seed, and the Texans as the 7 seed. The bye teams are in the AFC are the Bills, the Ravens, and the Chargers. They'll have a first-round bye in the wildcard round. And then it would be the Jaguars versus the Texans. I think the Jaguars win that game. And then it's the Bengals versus the Chiefs. And I have the Bengals winning that game. And then in the divisional round, it would be the Bills versus the Bengals. I have the Bengals winning that game, being a surprise win on the road there in Buffalo. But I think this Bengals team, people are sleeping on a little bit. And Joe Burrow, as I said on the Quarterback Rankings podcast episode, I think he's still the best quarterback in the NFL. Now moving on to the Ravens and Jaguars game. I think the Ravens win this one, but I think that could be a close game. And I could be way wrong with the Jaguars making the playoffs. There had to be some hot takes in here. And I do still believe in Trevor Lawrence. And I think Liam Cohen is going to help open up that playbook and help really bring him, up to speed and get him back on track. Then in the conference championship, we'd have the Ravens and the Bengals. Obviously, a divisional rival here. I have the Ravens winning that one. In the NFC and the wild card round, these would be the seeds 1 through 7. Packers would have a bye, the Eagles would have a bye, and the Bucs would have a bye. Packers would be the 1 seed, Eagles would be the 2 seed, the Bucs would be the 3 seed. And then the Rams would be the 4 seed, Bears would be the 5 seed, Commanders would be the 6 seed, and the Panthers would be the 7 seed. I would have Rams versus Panthers in round 1 in the wild card round. Out of the Rams winning that game, and then the Bears beating the Commanders in their wild card game. And then moving on to the divisional round, it would be the Packers versus the Bears. This would be a divisional matchup here, and obviously a rivalry. I'm going to go with the Packers winning that one. And then it would be the Eagles versus the Rams, a very good playoff game from last year. I think the Eagles would take this one, but I think that would be a close game. And then moving on for the conference championship, we would have the Eagles versus the Packers, and I would give the Packers the edge over Philadelphia here. And then in the Super Bowl, it would be Green Bay versus Baltimore, which might have been my prediction last year. I can't remember correctly, but I definitely had Green Bay winning the Super Bowl or being in the Super Bowl last year. And my prediction this year will be the Packers over the Ravens in the Super Bowl, with Super Bowl MVP being Jordan Love. I was very close to going Xavier McKinney. I just have a feeling he might have a big-time play in that game, which obviously no one knows how the season will play out. So predicting the Super Bowl MVP right now is not an easy task, but I'm going to go with Jordan Love winning the Super Bowl MVP. And now for the MVP award, the Offensive Player of the Year award, and the rest of the awards in the NFL. MVP award, I'm going to go Jordan Love. I expect a big-time year with him, considering they added Matthew Golden to that offense, and he already has a good supporting cast, a good offensive line. Josh Jacobs, a very good running back. Tucker Kraft, a very good tight end, probably under the radar. No one really talks about him enough, but he's a very good tight end who could take another step up this year and be even better this year. And then you also look at the rest of the receivers on that team. Romeo Doubs is pretty competitive, and he's a good receiver. Dontavion Wicks is a guy that is probably under the radar now. I know there was a lot of hype around him last year, and I was very high on him heading into last season. But he's under the radar. I think he could have a good year as well. And then Matthew Golden, just adding some speed to that offense and route running, is going to help out Jordan Love. Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go Bijan Robinson. Has the best offensive line probably right now and had a really good year last year. And considering he's healthy and he's still young, he's going to put up some big numbers on this team, I think, this year for the Falcons. He's my Offensive Player of the Year award winner. Defensive Player of the Year, it's tough. I was going to go Myles Garrett. And considering the Browns are probably going to be down in some games, he might not get as many pass rushing opportunities and chances at sacks. So I'm going to change it. I wanted to go Myles Garrett, but I'm going to change it to Micah Parsons. I think he could be a similar addition to that Bears defense that Khalil Mack was for that Chicago Bears defense when he was traded from the Raiders to the Bears. He was a big-time player and obviously made some big-time plays on that Bears defense in the first few years. I think Micah Parsons has a really similar ability and has a big-time year this year for Green Bay's defense, which they needed another pass rusher, and they ended up getting it. Coach of the Year, I'm going to go Ben Johnson of the Bears. I expect the Bears to surprise a lot of people and be a potential playoff team. And like I already noted, I think the Bears could be not only a playoff team, I think they could win a playoff game. I think I said that in my quarterback episode with Mike Hurley. I think this Bears team is going to surprise some people. I would not be surprised to see them win a playoff game this year, and that's why I had them beating the Commanders in the wild card round. So I think Ben Johnson, if things do go well and they end up making the playoffs, I think he's a very good candidate for Coach of the Year, considering the Bears haven't won a playoff game since 2011, so we're looking at just about 15 years since they've won a playoff game. And then you also add in, they've never had a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards. I think Caleb Williams breaks that this year. I expect big numbers from him. I think he can throw for 35 touchdowns and 4,200 yards. And in that case, not only would Ben Johnson maybe be Coach of the Year, but in that case, Caleb Williams could also potentially be a candidate for the MVP award, which I expect big numbers from him. And once again, could be completely wrong with some of these things. You never know, but I have a lot of faith in Caleb Williams heading into this year, and I expect big numbers. And then Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Emeka Egbuka of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I expect big numbers from him as well. I think when you look at Baker Mayfield, he loves slinging the ball downfield. He's a fun quarterback to watch, honestly, and he's definitely going to be throwing the ball a ton this season. And I think Egbuka's in a really good position to put up some big-time numbers this year. So he's my Offensive Rookie of the Year. I expect a really big season from him. And when you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will be back at some point, and they have a good run game as well, the defense is not going to be able to really probably pay attention just to a guy like Egbuka. They're probably going to have to keen in on Bucky Irvin and Mike Evans. So I do think Egbuka is going to be in a really good position to put up some good numbers this year and maybe catch around 8 touchdowns. So he's my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And the Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Abdul Carter of the Giants. Similar to Egbuka, defenses are not going to be able to just to prepare for him because they have to be ready for Mike Evans and Bucky Irvin. And then you look at Abdul Carter. Opposing offensive lines are going to have to prepare for Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, so they're not going to be able to just prepare for Abdul Carter, and I expect that He'll put up some big numbers next to those guys, maybe finish the year with double-digit sacks, and win the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. So we'll see how things work out. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Best of luck to all your teams this season, and I hope you guys enjoy the start of the NFL season and enjoy the first NFL football Sunday. Take care now and have a good one.